Cool. So, my name is Patrick McConville, and we're both second semester seniors. We're in Brett Stowell's capstone for information systems, and pretty much our capstone project is to work with the chairs of the departments of the different departments in the business school and figure out how we can make the whole merit process for you guys a little bit more efficient and easier.
Okay.
So to start off, could you just walk us through the merit process and what you have to do?
So you're seeking corroborating information from each of the chairs?
Yep.
Okay, so we have the process starts with individual faculty members who each write their own self-assessment following guidelines that are set up in the policy manual for the College of Business. And that results in very inconsistent documents across the faculty. And so our job as chairs is then to review each of the individual faculty members' submissions and write a draft letter that summarizes the information, but also draws in other information that the faculty members sometimes don't have access to, which makes no sense to me. So for example, they can calculate their own grade point averages, but then the institutional research group calculates grade point averages, or the registrar does, but so our associate dean gets that information and then she gives it to the chairs, but the faculty never have it. And so it's like, you know, it's, in my mind, useless. It's a useless comparison for us to make if the faculty members individually don't know it, because the whole point of the process is for each faculty member to improve what he or she does. And if one of the criteria we use for assessing the contributions of each faculty member is how their grade point averages compare across sections of the same course or across all courses, all faculty who teach in our college and elsewhere, then if they don't know it, it's worthless. So that's a huge flaw in my mind. We also have things that a couple of years ago, when we were doing our AACSB accreditation self-study, and I was then director of program accreditation and review in the WCB, I said, and I'd also been on the multiple times on the committee established to examine our merit process. And I said, we have to report information to the AACSB that our faculty are not given credit for doing. And yet we're asking them to do these things in support of us being accredited, but we don't give them credit for it in our assessment of their performance, which should be, I mean, service is one of the segments, and doing things that maintain our accreditation is huge. I mean, that's a huge contribution, and they're not given any reward for it. And so it's not in the document, and they don't put it, it's not in our policy manual, and so they don't put it in their documents. And then we're trying to backfill. Well, I know this person did this and that person did that, but we don't have a recording mechanism for that. So the merit committee, in another incantation under the director who followed me, Kevin Devine, came up with a new process that was approved by the faculty. So everything is going to change anyway. So, you know, while you're doing this, you need to look at the new document because it will call for different things. Plus, in that capacity, I was working with Michelle Matherly at the university level on adopting a university-wide database system for tracking faculty contributions. And that system, I mean, we had a system already in the College of Business that we'd used for 10 or 15 years. I can't remember how long. But the person who developed that system wouldn't compete for the university contract. And so we had to drop our system and go with the new system that was adopted by the provost for all of the faculty in the university. And so that we've been going through a transition, a movement of all of our data from that one system to the new system. That's been handled by Michelle Matherly with her grad assistant. But I thought it would be up and running for this year's merit review, but no, we still don't have it. So it's supposed to be up for next year. And once it's up for next year, then a lot of the standardization problems that we have will go away, because it'll just be getting faculty input their data in this database system instead of creating a document that looks like nothing else anybody else does, that doesn't have a repository for all the information in a standardized way. So if that system ever gets off the ground, that should solve a lot of the problems that we have with internal inconsistencies.
Oh, you go ahead, Peter.
So I've been chair for 2 years. So Michelle and I were on that committee, the university-wide committee, with a couple of the other associate deans and the provost, or the associate provost at the time, the year before that. So it's, and our system was already, our Sedona system was already in place for years, but faculty were never really driven to update their data in that system. And they were given no credit for doing it. So nobody did it. They just, every year when they do their merit review individually, they just pull in stuff that they had and put it in this document, send it to the chairs. And so that led to huge inconsistencies, which should go away when the new system comes up. But it's, that's 3 years in the making now, and we still don't have it. So
you just talked about a little bit, like the documentation. So what exactly goes into the documentation now, and what do you think is being left out?
what are we given credit for, you mean?
Yeah.
So we have 3 different categories. There's teaching, research, and service. For our research, that's the easiest one, because we're reporting on a rolling window, 3-year window, I think it is, publications and presentations at academic conferences and things like that. And because we have to stay current in our research for non-PhD tenured and tenure track faculty, then it becomes an issue of maintaining their academic qualifications through tested experience. So they have to do the same thing with respect to what they do in practice that maintains their currency within their teaching field. So those things are the easier things to track. And then there's teaching, and teaching is, well, service is you list everything you've done, but the service thing is a nightmare too, because a lot of people get on committees and never even, they maybe show up for meetings to get attendance. Your students, you know how this works. If they count attendance, you show up long enough to get credit, but you might not be engaged in the class at all. You're just, button a seat so that you get credit for being there. So what we need for shared governance is for anybody who's appointed to a committee to actually be really engaged in that committee, providing service to the university or to the college, if it's a college committee, instead of just having their name, like joining a club on campus. You're a member, but you never show up. So that's a huge problem. We have those line items, but we have no way to really measure people's performance in those committee appointments. So that's a problem. Then with teaching, we have the student course evaluation data that is provided through Canvas to each faculty member for the courses that they teach. But that is the average scores assigned by students for each of the items, plus all their verbal responses on the open-ended questions that are just listed in a list in a file. But that's not supposed to be even the most important part of the faculty members, each faculty member's assessment on teaching. It's supposed to be, what do you do to make your courses valuable? And how does that change over time? So we don't want people to do the same thing for 20 years in a class, use the same test, the same syllabus, the same book. We want people to do things that really engage our students, and to use a lot of experiential activities and cases and things like that that really help tie what students learn content-wise in a class to what they actually will do in life with the material that they're learning. And that's harder to get people to report on. So there's no real guidance on how to include that. The closest we've gotten is when we were going through our preparation for the Higher Learning Commission reassessment for reaccreditation. Michelle and maybe the other associate deans came up with an Excel spreadsheet to add things to that allow people to put in guest speakers, cases, experiential activities, field trips, whatever they do, to make the course material come alive in this table, but that's hard to aggregate. So that's an issue. So mostly it's like, yeah, this person did 10 things on the experiential grid, but it's like going to committee meetings. Well, did you just go to the meeting, or did you do something for this committee? So did you bring in a speaker? Was it a good speaker? Was it an average speaker? Was the experience, was the field trip worth it? We don't have any good way to standardize what data even people give to us in that domain. So what we try to do in the College of Business is better than I think what they have done for years in the other colleges, in that we try to have a standardized process, but it's still hugely subjective, as it should be, I think. I mean, there's nothing wrong with subjectivity. It's just that when we try to standardize it, okay, so we do these self-assessments for the college to do evaluations of the contributions of each individual faculty member. In the 25 years I've been here, the highest raised pool we've ever had is 3%. This year we're not having raises at all. So it's like, if you're thinking this is going to motivate anybody to do better, then you're sadly mistaken. And, I mean, there were studies years ago. There were studies of, if you've taken psychology classes, you may have heard of it. It's just perceptible differences. That means, how much does something have to change before you notice it changed? And they've done things like with light dimmers, with the rheostat switches on lights. How much do you have to change the actual illumination in a room before people go, the lights changed? And how big a raise do people have to get before they notice they got a raise? Actually, studies in human resource management have been kind of the negative impact of that too. How small can a raise be before it just ticks people off instead of ends up being a motivator? 15%. 15%. And the biggest raise pool we've ever had is 3%. So it's like a case of do as I say, not as I do, because we can talk about it all day long, but we don't implement anything. Like, we give people 5-point scales. There's been research forever that's shown that a 5-point scale just plays to the worst in response set biases that people have. I mean, it gives a very clear middle and a high and a low. And if I have a stringency bias, I just pick the low end. And it doesn't give enough spread. If you use a 9-point scale, there's no obvious middle, and there's enough room at the ends that if you have a stringency or a leniency bias, you can still spread people out around the ends. So you can always tell who your worst players are and who your best players are. So the whole thing is, in my humble opinion, if you show this recording to anybody, I'll swear you tampered with the tape, is crap.
Okay. Yeah. So you talked about how like you get sent all these documents and they're all very different. They're all kind of messy in their own way. So as a chair, how do you go through those documents and you know, make them in a standardized way across your department?
Well, we do that by what we include in our letters, and then our committee meets to agree on what we try to increase the consistency in the interpretation of the raw data by making sure that we're giving equivalent credit for things across all the chairs. So if somebody had a 4.0 and all of their classes is a class average, we all say that's too high, and that's just way too high. And, we need to rein that in. And here's some things that you could do to get your grade point averages down to a reasonable area. Or, yeah, no, that's fine. Well, we have three components. We have some general comments. We have a section on on teaching, then on scholarship, and then on service. And so we make comments on each of those where we use what the faculty members have turned in, but we also draw in more data. And then we try to make sure that we are all even-handed in our statements interpreting any persons. Everybody has access to all the dossiers that are turned in by each of the faculty members and the draft letters that each chair has written. And then we meet, and this year and last year we did 3 meetings, 3 days of meetings. So we do a look at everybody's teaching in the college. On the next meeting, well, we did the teaching faculty first, and then their whole portfolio, because it's just teaching and service. And then we had a meeting where we talked about all the tenured and tenure track faculties teaching, nothing else. And we'll meet tomorrow in another, like 4 or 5 hour meeting to talk about everybody's scholarship and service. So, and if we need another meeting, we'll schedule it, but that's the plan so far.
So is this data stored and then evaluated in future years too?
Well, not for the annual merit process. So the annual merit process is what we're working on right now, and that's where we would normally be making determinations about who would get raises when there's a raise. But we've known for a year we're not getting raises this year because of the COVID thing. So we're just doing it as the most important part of it is the self-reflection of the faculty on how they're doing and our ability as chairs to counsel and advise. So that's annual. But then there are points where different faculty members come up for promotion. The first one for the tenure track faculty is at 6 years, where they put together a summary dossier of everything they've done since they've been at Xavier in terms of those 3 buckets of stuff: teaching, scholarship, and service. And so it aggregates over time. And so we're looking at the portfolio of things that people have done over their time at Xavier for decisions about whether they would be promoted from assistant professor without tenure to associate professor with tenure. There are some cases where people go up for associate without tenure, but those are becoming fewer and further between. And then the next big juncture for the tenure track faculty is promotion to full professor. So that has to be, I think, a minimum of 5 years after you've been in the associate professor rank. And then the criteria shift a little bit, because then you have to have a sustained high level of performance in teaching and research, but you also have to have a really stepped up game in terms of service. And it's not just to the college, but to the university. So,
So, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
How is all of this data stored? Is it in the R drive?
Uh, well, so I've been a chair for 2 years, so so
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. So,
Have you had to access it at all?
well, I access it for the review of the faculty that I've had to review for the last 2 years as a faculty
Yeah.
member. So when I was an elected or appointed member of the merit committee, we have 3 faculty members who serve as what do we call that job? One of the service roles we have in the colleges for 3 faculty members each year to serve on the merit committee, and all they do is sit in as non-participants to make sure that the process is even-handed. So if anyone were to file a grievance about their review, the feedback that they're given, then the there would be a review with the faculty, the chair, and the dean, and the members of that oversight group. I can't remember what we call those roles. Anyway, so that's one thing. So the people who are not chairs don't have access to the documents of their colleagues in their department, and they don't have access all the time. They only have access right ahead of the merit meetings, and then their access goes away. But the letters that are written become part of the faculty member's permanent record. And so when they're going up for promotion, it's not just a college decision, because tenure is granted by the university to the university, not to a department or a college. So I am tenured at Xavier University. I happen to be a professor of management, but if they would cancel the management department, my job wouldn't go away because I'm tenured to the university. So I'd have to do something really heinous, like, shoot somebody in the hallway or something to be fired, so long as the university doesn't have, the only reasons the university could do away with faculty members who are tenured is in financial exigency. So we're selling off artwork, because we're broke. So that's not a good thing. I've seen that happen before in my years in academia, but it's not a good thing. The university's in bad shape if something like that is happening.
So,
So that's a permanent record. So once a letter is written, then it's on file, and that's why somebody would appeal it. It's like, if I get a bad review and I know it's going to affect me in the future, I'm going to appeal it now. But outside of the merit review process, then the decision, because tenure is to the university, that goes to a university rank and tenure. So it's, a whole different process. So when I'm going up for tenure, I put together a dossier and I submit that to the provost's office. And then there is a rank and tenure committee in the faculty members department, home department. So that committee is made up of all tenured faculty members in that department. And then, so those people review the candidate's portfolio of stuff for the 6 years, and write a letter, either in support or not. And the chair independently reviews the file and writes a letter in support or not. And the dean of the college does the same thing. And all those 3 letters from the rank and tenure committee in the department, the chair, and the dean get posted, and they're accessed by the university rank and tenure committee. And that committee is made up of tenured faculty from across the university. And they review all the documents, because remember, tenure is to the university, not to the department or the college. So they all assess everybody's candidacy. And the provost is a member of that body as well.
So, we really only have about 5 minutes left. We're not supposed to go much over a half hour.
Thank God I'm out of voice. I've been in nonstop meetings since 11 o'clock.
So I guess one of the last questions would be, if you had to make some trade-offs, what do you think the biggest issues that we could, solve? I guess like prioritize to make the merit process easier for you.
The standardization of the documents that are prepared by each of the faculty members is, in my mind, the biggest flaw in the system. So our policy is not clear about what is to be included and how it's to be framed. And so people turn in things that are very different. Part of that, if we're looking across the university, it makes more sense that would happen, because some of the faculty who are going up for tenure are artists, they're musicians. They don't publish in journals necessarily. There are historians, they would, but if a person is a performance artist in theater, they're not going to publish a paper. They might get a play staged, if they write a play, but other than that, it might be acting. So
I mean, like, sorry, more like specifically to the College of Business.
Well, but it's not just the College of Business, because the whole process feeds into the university process. So what I'm saying is that that we have some leeway in what we do makes sense, because they're all over the place outside of the college. And if we try to focus too granularly on the College of Business, that might not be very helpful to anybody at the university. I mean, it will look very objective and very slick and very professional, but it might not be any more meaningful than looking at somebody's hangings in an art gallery somewhere. It's still all subjective. It's just fancied up in a document somewhere,
Yeah. Peter, is there anything else you want to ask?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so two things I would say. First is that whatever data the dean would like to see in terms of performance on in teaching, like GPAs per class, should be given to the faculty holistically, so everybody individually knows what they're doing in comparison to everybody else. That makes it very transparent and very level playing field. And so it's not like a bait and switch. Like, I'm looking at my GPAs, but I have no idea how high or low they are compared to everybody else's. And I think I'm doing a good job. And then all of a sudden the dean says, well, no, you're not, because your grade point average is 0.02 of a percentage point higher than your colleagues in your department, or than people in, a different department. It's like, how would I know that? I have no way to know that. And now you're holding me accountable for something I have no control over, no information about. Is totally unfair in my mind. And then, so the standardization of the information that individual faculty have needs to happen. And then how we, as individual faculty, input that information into a structure that will be reviewed by the chairs and the deans needs to happen. Cool.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm happy to help in any way that we
Yeah,
can with this
I hope
process
you
for
can
you.
put a big Band-Aid on it.
That's the goal.
Thanks, guys.
All
It was
right,
nice to
thank
meet you
you.
all. All right.
Have a
Good
good
luck
one.
on your project.
Thanks.
Bye. Oh, where's my cursor?